I'm sorry to say, but Far Cry 6 is the least fun I've had with a Far Cry. While the game is the biggest and most explosive entry, literally, in the series, other recent games that have really pushed the boundaries of gameplay in new, exciting ways make the Far Cry formula feel more stale than ever. The good news is, if you're just looking for more Far Cry, this game will give you that. But if you've been feeling burnt out by the series over the last couple of entries, Far Cry 6 doesn't do anything that's going to course correct the franchise for you. Far Cry 6 is set in the fictional Caribbean country of Yara, which has recently elected Giancarlo Esposito's Anton Castillo as its new leader. He won based on the promise that he would bring prosperity to Yara through the process of turning its abundant tobacco plants into vivero, the world's most successful treatment for cancer. In order to harvest the tobacco, Castillo institutes a draft, where supposedly every Yaran citizen could potentially be a chosen worker in the fields. It is soon clear to the citizens of the country, however, that only its most marginalized are the ones that are picked, with groups of freedom fighters popping up against the dictatorial regime. You play as Danny Rojas. No, not that Danny Rojas, this Danny Rojas. The interesting thing about Danny is that they are a reluctant freedom fighter. They've given up hope of Yara's future and wish to escape to imagined greener pastures in America. Danny is roped into the revolutionary actions of the group Libertad, initially hesitant to fight the fight they don't think is worth fighting. It would be interesting if the game explored Danny's reluctances as a freedom fighter with any depth, but in a matter of minutes they quickly go from unwilling revolutionary to the hero of Libertad. It's an interesting angle to approach the subject matter from, but it's never properly explored to build on the promise of its potential. What is great about Danny Rojas is that they are an actual character, a breath of fresh air, after the literal nameless protagonists of Far Cry 5 and Far Cry New Dawn. The characters around them are also the most interesting the series has had to offer, with compelling dynamics among the members of each revolutionary group, as well as the dynamics between the different groups themselves. It's easily the strongest aspect of the game. What about the man all over the game's marketing, Anton Castillo, Esposito himself? One of the main questions I had before playing was, how much could such a busy actor possibly be in this game? And the answer is pretty predictable. Not much at all. Unlike previous antagonists, Castillo's presence looms over Danny's adventures like a specter, rather than getting stuck in the action himself. The game justifies this by hiding Castillo away in Yara's capital, Esperanza, a place that is incredibly dangerous to try to penetrate without ranking up yourself and gaining new allies. A lot of the game's villainy comes from Castillo's deputies that reign the three other regions that comprise Yara's mainland. Esposito's performance, much like his other villainous roles, is strong, but there's no reason this character needed to be played by the acclaimed actor other than for marketing purposes. There's also no reason to have an actor that isn't Latino, like Esposito, who's actually Danish and Italian, in the role of the ruler of the Latin nation. Speaking of the capital, Esperanza, it's home to one of the few, and possibly only, urban locations in the Far Cry franchise. Unfortunately, this area, like I mentioned above, is locked behind ranks and alliances you need to make over the course of the game. Trying to fly into it before then will result in an immediate death, and even if you attempt to sneak inside its boundaries, enemies are so overpowered in the area you'll just spend your time running around until you're eventually mowed down. When you do eventually get to the right rank to tackle Esperanza, it's a disappointing experience. The game uses the narrative of a lockdown to prevent you from entering buildings and explaining why the streets, rather than littered with civilians, are simply patrolled by Castillo's soldiers. It ultimately proves to be one of the weaker areas of the game. The majority of your time is going to be spent exploring the same sort of rural environments you've come to expect from the Far Cry series, with the same types of enemy compounds and checkpoints to clear out and claim in the name of Libertad. Outside of a few unique areas that I genuinely enjoyed exploring, Yara fails to set its environments apart from past games, and is potentially my least favorite locale the series has had yet. The new gameplay elements are also just fine. There's an amigos mechanic where you have different animal partners you can use in battle. They can be useful at times when you want to keep an enemy busy, but they're kind of useless when trying to play sneakily, constantly drawing attention to guards that something is afoot. I very quickly gave up on playing with them. The Supremo, a backpack that can shoot different types of ordnance, is fun to use, but I always came back to the initial one you unlock. The additional Supremos, such as the one that emits a poison gas, just aren't as fun or useful. The game also gives Danny the ability to equip different gear with different perks. My particular favorite being the Blood Dragon Cybernetic Eye that comes as a part of the Deluxe Edition and tags nearby enemies when you get a kill. The perk system is a solid mechanic, but it's a shame that certain useful perks are locked behind specific gear with no way to transmog and transfer those perks to different items. The game also adds different ammunition types and makes it so that certain enemies are weaker to different weapons. This was something I kept bumping up against. The frantic nature of the combat constantly halted by the constant need to equip and unequip different weapons. The game severely impedes your ability to take out enemies unless you're using the exact ammunition type they're weak to, turning the once fun practice of clearing out an enemy compound into a practice of frustration. On the visual front, the game impresses, although on PC I was running into two issues in particular. The first was that certain textures were failing to fully render. Yes, I had downloaded the HD texture pack, and yes, I had it turned on in the menu. But certain things like Danny's armor, elements to the guns, the Supremo, and the Amigos were a visible downgrade to the rest of the game. The other issue I had to do was with stuttering, which would happen when jumping in and out of menus. Sometime it would resolve itself by re-accessing the menus, but a handful of times it required a complete restart. I'm running the game on a 3080 GPU with the latest driver from Nvidia installed that says is specifically made for Far Cry 6. I had tons of trouble with Ubisoft's Watch Dogs Legion and Assassin's Creed Valhalla on PC last year, so Far Cry 6 doesn't break the trend of poorly optimized PC games for the company. At the end of the day, Far Cry 6 will probably scratch an itch for a lot of fans of the series, but it really misses the mark of bringing the franchise into the next generation. There are some strong elements to the story and characters, but it falls rather flat when combined with the mundane new gameplay mechanics and, for the most part, uninteresting locations. In a sea of great games coming out this fall, this is a revolution you shouldn't feel bad for skipping out on.